Get ready. And we're about to announce debut, and you'll discover what it is about now. Hey, welcome to the debut interview series. If you're wondering what debut is, hey, you're behind the times because everybody should be talking about it. Debut is exactly what it sounds. It is the first story from accomplished storytellers that tell a story that they've never told before. And then during that time, people who are watching and experiencing the story are giving some feedback, possibly on the story direction. It's a wonderful time. And then we come back and talk about the process. And we have amazing storytellers from all over. And this next storyteller is from San Diego, which is doing amazing things in storytelling. Whether she works with story within the context of puppetry or storytelling, from what I understand, she is also a teacher, has been trained in Waldorf, and this is what's on the page. Let me tell you what's not. Just in the short time that I've met this storyteller, I can tell she has the heart that goes out to story, that she spends time working with the craft and is open to learning more all the time. She'll have to tell me if it's not true, but I think it is that she's a student as well as a teacher of all the things that story offers. And it is such a warm day to welcome Miss Mindy Donner. Welcome,
Thank you,
Mindy.
Kevin. I feel welcomed.
Oh, good. That's our whole purpose.
Very welcome. Yes.
So, how is everything in San Diego and in the world of story?
San Diego is sunny and the garden is blooming, the songbirds are singing, and the storytellers are juicy.
I like
Yeah.
that. Okay. There's great things going on, especially in California and San Diego. And so, we've all been affected by the pandemic, but at the same time, have you been able to work on your story as a craft during this time or uh,
Well, it's taken some really sort of untoward and wonderful turns and twists. So I think the learning from this is always to be that flexible flow and to dodge out when it just when it seems impossible. But this is a small story, if you will, of the art in during the time of COVID, that I had started a youth project um, from a committee in a nearby neighborhood, which is a refugee and immigrant community called City Heights. And they're a group of Bantu speakers who were born in the US. Their parents were from refugee camps in Kenya. And I happened to know one of them pretty well through the arts. And so when it came to my committee and going out and doing some work rather than just bringing people in to perform we had a library theater space which was pretty lucky near here. um, it it became apparent that this would be a great group to work with, and it took a long time to get to know them because they work by committee. They're a youth empowerment group, so they once a month they vote on who they want to come in, who they want to work with. That took a long time. So we got started before the COVID, but then the COVID hit, and the objective of this storytelling was to give voice to these youths so they could tell their stories of growing up in City Heights, which at times has had a mediocre to poor reputation, and they could tell it through their own experiences. This was based on a survey that they had done a couple years before. They had surveyed 300 youths of various backgrounds in City Heights as to how they saw their community. And so I already had the topics. That's why I was invited in. I said, I can work with those topics through puppetry and storytelling. And we did it.
I
So
love
we were quarantined many times. We worked on porches after we lost our community centers that closed for the pandemic. Once we were at the edge of a parking lot. We've been everywhere in City Heights. They made their puppets from scratch. They wrote their stories. We talked and talked, and the topics that they covered, and then I'll change the subject. The topics that they covered um, are the topics, which they're cleanliness and homelessness, safety and law enforcement, and education. And those were the topics that spoke most directly to their hearts. So it's all out on video. We had to raise the funds for the video.
We can put a
But
link up for that.
yeah, yeah. Okay. I
That
would
sounds
love,
like a super powerful project, and I am all for giving youth a voice. I mean, I co-authored a book called Raising Voices: Youth Storytelling Groups and Troops, because honestly, I had a student once say to me, we were taking them actually to the National Storytelling Conference, about 9 of them, in Kansas City, Missouri. And they did an amazing. We were actually told, okay, they can't tell stories, but they can present a program. I mean, I was like, okay, wait, it's a storytelling conference. Uh,
okay.
so I had to revisit that. So we told the story within the context of the program. And my students came up to me and said, we were so scared to present in front of all these storytellers. And afterwards, they lined up. She said, I have never been sought out for what I have to say in all my life. She was 17 years old. And I just don't think we champion youth voices. We keep them invisible, and that's not right. And so I really value what you're doing there. And certainly we'd love to share more about that.
Well, I was very stoked, as we say here in San Diego, extremely stoked that the storytellers of San Diego during our recent online festival, because everything's going online, um, included that video that was made under the auspices of the San Diego Guild of Puppetry. Um, it has tons of storytelling in it. And we're shy of rehearsal time, but we had other collaborators and we were in a program together, the older youth with photography on the same subjects. It was pretty powerful. And I just, uh, I just have had such a, I think, such a wonderful aftermath of this. That's what it's been.
That's
The Yeah, because there's the process, and sometimes the process is crazy and wonderful. Sometimes it's crazy and wow, I don't know. Things happen. We're out there in the street practically doing this project. Things happen, and yeah, but the aftermath, and that means a lot.
and I'm sure they
And yes,
value those voices. They really value.
years in the trenches, Kevin. Yes,
And at the same time, let's look at you as a storyteller. We
yeah.
all have people that we looked at or emulated, or I guess the question I'm asking is, how did you find storytelling, or did storytelling find you?
It found me. I remember people saying long ago, "Oh, wow, you story tell a lot." And I wasn't quite, I don't think I was aware of it, or I wasn't aware of what that meant. But I took this Waldorf teacher training, and it's a very unusual training, and um, one delves into different art forms. And we had a storytelling class for a semester, and I was just thinking about it, and thinking about the teacher Rosemary Gabert, who was from England, and she was a very gentle, reserved person, and just gave us this wonderful world with all these resources. And I remember her telling us the story how in her village in England, she was hired by the city council, or it wasn't a city, the village council, to sit on the hill, a grassy knoll somewhere, once a week and tell stories to whoever showed up. And I remember just being rather transfixed by that and thinking, how would that be? It sounds marvelous. And she led us very gently into this world, and it was formidable because we were telling stories in front of our peers, like right away. And that was a group. That was a very accomplished group, many musicians in the group. And it was a little knee knocking. Learned a lot.
And it sounds like she was
Particularly,
gentle, but pushed you, and didn't
she said,
push. Well, maybe she did.
yeah,
She
yeah,
she knew
yeah.
that
And
story was about connection. It's
she
not
knew
about
stories.
distance.
No, no. And I have actually um, adopted Rosemary's philosophy because when I'm involved in mentoring a workshop, um, whatever it is, I get people up to tell. I'm not. I don't believe that you lecture about storytelling, and then a storyteller is born who's watching you.
Yeah, it just reminds me, the professors who say, my education professors, I've literally sat in and where they said, lecture is the worst way to connect with students, and they're doing it in the form of lecture. You know, you also recognize story as an art, but story embedded in many arts. Can you speak a little to that? Just how you've dabbed
Yeah.
into or dived
Yes.
into many arts.
Yes. Yes. That even I think for me, even something that could be abstraction, whether it's watercolor painting or a dance or whatever, to me has a nexus of story, or I read story into it. I'm a cloud watcher. I lie on my back still after all these years, and I'll watch the clouds, and I'll find all kinds of mythical beasts and wonderful creations up there, and then a story starts forming. And I think that's that's part of the way I'm wired. So that even if it's way abstract, as like Butoh dance can be extremely abstract looking, but there's always the image from which a person finds the inner gesture that becomes the outer gesture. It's very non-Western. You've probably seen it, but and that's a very small part of my life, but I'm just bringing that in because it seems very significant that working with the images.
And so when you're telling stories, you're incorporating those kind of ideas, are you not? I
Yes.
mean, is it possible you can give us an example of how you might have done
Um, as I think this is also a theater technique.
that?
Um, that my teacher Rosemary was seated on the grassy knoll, looking out at the field and the audience that was assembling. I see it. The audience is going to look where I look. The audience will see into what I see.
And storytelling is about visible space when it's not there, if that makes sense. I'm just
Makes sense to
reacting
me.
to what you're saying is we can direct people to see what's not there on its apparent face, but through the body, through the sound, through the movement. And you have studied movement in that sense. Can you speak a little bit, well, you've already done, maybe a little more on how movement moves your story per se?
Yeah, yeah. I started dancing when I was 3 because I had flat feet. I still have flat feet. I still like to dance once in a while. And so on and off during my life, there's been a lot of dance, a lot of dance training. And as an adult, after a certain point, when I came back to it after a long hiatus, I realized that I love improvisation the best, the
I
play.
Hey, you got me here. I
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
love
yeah.
play. And
I love
we
it
need to
so
dance, don't we?
much. We do. And it doesn't matter if you dance without really moving the appendages, because the dance, I really believe, happens from the inside.
Oh
I
yeah.
really believe that. And, we know today there are groups of wheelchair dancers, et cetera, et cetera. And I knew such a person actually, that it's not about flailing the appendages around. It's, the inner there's an inner gesture for each image, for each word. It can change,
I think
morphs.
I think that can also transfer into how we are as storytellers. Sometimes we think that we're word conscious when we're really experience conscious. When we
Yeah,
need to capture as a co-creative work story using dance, movement, sound. Uh, I mean, wow, right? I mean, theater has that audience, that perceived wall, but Ed Steimer says that wall disappears and it's
yes.
connected. But what I'm getting from you is that connection is more than sight. That connection is within the mind, within the body, and I argue for the breathing. I
The
think
breath is everything.
if you can get an audience to breathe at the same rate you are, I think it builds a connection. What do you think?
I know it does. All you have to do to gather your audience is to stand there and breathe and look out and make those people friends. There are lots of friends in your audience,
Often
people who yeah.
we rush to sound when we should dwell in silence because it makes the most
And
noise.
oh, wow, that was pithy. That was pretty pithy, Kevin. So, in puppetry, we say I'm just gonna do it with my hand. Oh,
I love it.
there's a focus. I'm focusing through my puppet, which is my hand puppet, and the breath is everything. I think that's, the same for performance. Um, I'm not a musician, although I've done a lot of arts integration, as have you, and I've taught that. And so therefore I'm in the world of music, which terrifies me, but I love it so much. And then those who know in the know say, take a breath, let it out.
Mm.
Let your first note come out. Um, so as far as I know, every art form works with the breath. I have to let go of my breath and let it out before I put the brush to the watercolor paper or the brush to the puppet face
Only if the teacher
paint.
recognizes that the breath is quintessential. I mean, I've seen people rush to the print and rush to the paint as opposed to taking a moment. I always tell people when they tell stories, they shouldn't rush to words. They should take at least 3 seconds. I actually say, um, look at the left side, the center side, and the right side, and say, "I have a story for you. Will you accept it? I have a story for you. Will you accept it?"
Beautiful,
In my head, and then try to tell or just tell.
beautiful, beautiful. Because this encompasses, and this reminds me of an exercise I learned from my good friend who's a mime and a storyteller, um, that you direct something here. Hey, my name is Mindy. I love to eat sprouts. My favorite color is green. And you've encompassed all those beans in that.
Yes,
And it's a powerful exercise with youth.
I agree. And walking steps with intention, whole different than just I got to move here so I can closer to the audience. The boy Rick.
Oh, oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, we could spend the rest of our whole time talking about intentional movement, because I've had over the decades I've been in storytelling to like loosen my grip, and that's the way to do it, and accept people who do rather unintentional movement and just see that I've been pretty biased because it's from my background. They have a different background. They bring whatever they come with, which can be so power packed and marvelous and whimsical and dramatic. And I bring what I have.
Right.
So I can't bring what they have,
Well,
and they might not be able to bring what I have. We can influence each other somehow. So I've had to let go of my bias about sometimes people who move rather unintentionally. I know this, and you know this, that it wears out an audience if you're pacing,
mhm.
and that's something to address, with the folks who are getting started, that you just wear out your audience. They're
Mindy, how can you tell if a story was meant to be told by you?
oh gosh, it's with me. It leaps up immediately. It just grabs me. Now I have a mini story to tell you about how that. I don't usually learn stories from other tellers, but here's the exception. Probably 20 years ago, I happened to have had the great fortune to experience Len Cabral on a stage.
What a beautiful
And oh gosh, I was so blown away. And so he told the story from Margaret Reed MacDonald's book of Strength,
Oh yeah.
which is a very anti-gun, anti-war sentiment. Well, I just felt that I should be telling that story. But how do I put what he puts in his 6'3", dreadlocks down past his you know where, into my 5-foot body? How am I going to do? I knew that this was a challenge. How am I going to do this to find my way with the story? And so I had to work at it a lot. I had to work at it quite a lot because it's a, and I always tell that story before I tell the story if I'm with storytellers, because when they think about Len Cabral and then they think about me, it's an immediate laugh. It's funny.
And we can definitely learn from people like Len. A commercial for Len is that he's telling at the Story series online, I think this
Mm,
month. And
okay.
then a commercial for Margaret Reed MacDonald. Her newest book was just released on kindness. But let's come back to Mindy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
but
Wow.
but we do have to. When I first started telling, I say let's come to Mindy and I'd start telling. When I first started telling, I learned from old tapes that didn't have names on them. I mean, they only had the name. And I started to emulate Donald Davis or whoever it was, the folk tellers, and I didn't know better. But it sounds like you understand the value of deep listening to find the teller within. Would you speak to that if that's true?
Yes. Um, Deep listening has definitely been following me or leading me. Deep listening. Um, I have stories that are not mine to tell, but that I've interviewed some folks for the first annual Storytelling Fest in San Diego who are Holocaust survivors.
I was reading about that.
And those are not my stories to tell, but I can tell the story of interviewing them. Because it was that is my story to tell, and it was a very gratifying experience. Um, and then one gentleman who was a little bit over the top, a little bit impatient sometimes, and I took him out to lunch, or he took me out to lunch a couple times, and we you could tell we were going to be buds, and then I didn't realize that he was experiencing dementia. So that is my story, if I want to tell that story. Um, when I did realize it. And then luckily my address was found in his address book, and his son called me to go to attend his memorial out of town, and I went for all the storytellers. Um, so that's my story. Those are my stories to tell. Um, the deep listening, it means everything. And the experience that I just had midwinter, and this is a plug for Youth Standing Strong Camp, which is going to happen in the summer.
Yes.
It's about deep listening, and Sheila Arnold, who is one of the creators of uh, Assist, Artist Standing Strong Together, said right away in an online in-service coffee clutch, uh, forget about leading. This is about listening.
Oh, I love it. That's Sheila,
It
though.
said, yeah, that's Sheila. Said everything. So there weren't no lesson plans to make, or I'm going to set this, my teaching over all these years on you. You are my neophyte. Oh no. This young lady I worked with was my colleague within 10 minutes. Polished, imaginative, unbelievable. So, but that set the tone. And when Sheila said, "You are listening," and then she repeats it 3 different times during this little coffee class, "You are listening." Um, and that's the directive when I've called people and said, "Hey, I know you've been in the camp too, Kevin." And I call people and say, "Hey, I think you make a great camp mentor." And it's just an unusual mentorship, one-to-one, small group at each end.
I had
They
a
say,
great time. My student
"Yeah,
actually, we continued even after the camp. Um,
that's so beautiful."
and he talked about new ways that he was going to put his story and learn more stories. And people, Rafe Martin is a storyteller who said stories are trapped in books. It is the storyteller who sets them free. And
Woo!
so that is true for those who don't like to read. I still think you can get something for reading the book, but I think the camp symbolizes that. It's an
It does.
invitation to open up and Sheila's been listening not only to the needs of the tellers or the students, but also the tellers and affording spaces all over just for story. That's part of what debut is about as well.
Yes.
Affording spaces so we can
Yeah.
talk about craft. You've already alluded to it, but how is play central to your work, Mindy?
It, it's I always say this. I have to have levity to the gravity because I go
Oh,
into
I
some
like
kind of,
that. That's nice.
yeah, I go into some dark subjects. I do. And I'm careful with the audience because not everyone wants to go there with me. And so I have to be pretty careful. And it's really come up in the puppet theater world because some of the work I've done for youth, with youth, really goes to um, the levity and the gravity.
Sure.
So when I was rehearsing a play on the Donner Party, it's called West of Snow. I wrote it, and my collaborator, uh,
So
Ian
everybody wants
Gunn.
to know, is there a connection? Are you related? You have to answer that.
I have to answer that. I will at the end of this. We had a graph up on the wall, a long ream of paper, and that we went scene by scene, and it was a, a line graph, and it had peaks and valleys, and we looked at that because we needed to achieve that in just about every scene, I think, or you're going to put your young audience to sleep. And um, we had written let's bring levity to the gravity. And that's just something that's very hallowed for me, bringing levity to the gravity. So the play is, when you do the outtakes, you can go back and do the real thing with a whole different spirit. And sometimes we would just play outtakes. And I love that. It's just so crazy. And I have to tell you one of the fun things, but then I will tell you about the Donner Party connection.
Sure,
One of the
please.
fun things is, no, this wasn't fun. One of my best friends went to the other realm from cancer before her 40th birthday. And she used to refer to me as her spiritual mother, among probably a couple others. And she had a wild sense of humor. And we had collaborated on some crazy stuff. And it was from her crazy humor. It was all about tape and the dark things that could come with tape. And so I know she had written it and sent it to me. I couldn't find it on my computer. I couldn't find it in a physical file. Yeah, I'm one of those. I'm old enough to have physical files.
I have one.
So yeah, yeah. Couldn't find it, couldn't find it, couldn't find it. But I got together with another colleague who was all about play, and he does a lot of online animation and stuff like that, all about play. Crazy, crazy. And we just went for it.
Wow.
I didn't give it to about the Donner Party. So I honestly think that I'm not related, and this drives Marilyn McPhee nuts, that I won't I can't go back in my family because they came over way pre-Holocaust. They came over around the turn of the century, maybe a year before or something. I can't go back. I can't find them. And I've asked everybody, and it just seems to be sort of locked up. And then it goes back to the old country. Well, I would have to just go to Austria, Hungary, and just start searching. I mean, the empire was huge, but I know one set of the Hungarians. Those are not the Donners; those are the singers. But the Donners, I just don't see them as being related to that family that went out from Illinois. However, my good friend said, when I write grants, I'd always put a PS. I don't think I'm related because I know the committee's going to be going, who is she? Is she related? And we interview her, Um, uh, I always would say that because that's my way of being forthright. And he said, Mindy, do not say that. Tell them you're still researching it.
Well, Mindy, I have to share this with you. My grandmother's from West Virginia, and we only visited one place. I'm in Ohio and West Virginia, so I thought those two states were the only ones in the country. Um, and my grandmother, who she looked at me and she said, "Your uncle died on that great big boat." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "It's famous. It's a great big boat." And so I went to my aunt, and she said, "Don't you pay her no mind." And I never knew my grandmother to lie. My mother said, she's going to tell it to you truth. And then I went to my other aunt. I went to Aunt Ollie, and she said, "Now you go look it up." She says, "Your uncle died on the Titanic. His name's George West. It's in the Walter Lord's book. It's in the back of the book, and there I am." So I went to the museum when the Titanic toured, and there's his name. Now, as soon as you get there, they hand you that you're a passenger, and you go through as a passenger. But I didn't get him. But when I left and came out, there was my aunt who had lived, and no one said anything about her. George was married, so so you never know, right?
And trust your granny. That's what my takeaway
Oh,
is.
very much. Addie West was an amazing, amazing woman. Um,
Granny West. I love it.
oh,
We cleared up that.
there you go. There we go.
Sort of. I don't know what's clear. It's not clear who I'm related to, but
So, Mindy, you're going to be on. I was going to say the Donner Party, but no, you're going to be on debut. Not, it's different than the Donner Party, I guarantee. Lunch will not be served, and you will not be on it. Virtual lunch, baby.
oh,
Why do debut?
I just sounded like fun. I'm transitioning when the pandemic hit. I'm sure all your people are talking like this. When the pandemic hit, and then when the pandemic started, and then when the pandemic took over and infiltrated our lives. Well, I was on the nadir of a long teaching artist career, and I was going out at the most 3 times a week, at the most. And so then everything was in hiatus, and then this one program which was mostly visual arts in the class. Um, we I was asked if I wanted to reconvene with them and put on line lessons, and I said, "I love you all, but no thanks, and I'll make more work for other people." That's great,
Oh, there you go.
and yeah, it's just like I like things to just go organically like that. I
Right.
do because I like those people. I like all my people. I always do, and I always leave when I'm in good standing and I really like everyone. And I usually miss them a little, and it's fine. That's my way of gracefully making this bridge to the next thing. And I don't know what the next thing is, but Andrea contacted me and said, "So, Mindy, what about you want to do this thing called Debut?" And Kevin Cordy, and here's his thing, and I'll give him your number. And I said, "Sure."
Well, and
So
we're so glad that you did.
yeah,
And when is debut?
April 25th.
There we go. Sometimes I ask, and people are like, I don't remember.
Oh no,
Two
ticker tape,
o'clock
ticker
Eastern
tape,
Daylight
routine
Time.
artist brain, right?
There you go.
And I'm not gonna say what time because invariably when you say the time, I'll let you say it. And it was news to me recently that everything went to EDT and PEPT. It was just news to me since I'm asleep at the wheel sometimes. So uh, you say the time and let people figure it out because I've had to translate all those
Oh,
times
I
for
hear
the
you.
Youth Standing Strong Camp, and I translated them even to Greenwich Mean Time in England, so that people in Europe can use that as an anchor.
Right, because they've got a big
Right.
international focus right now
Yeah,
to tellers
yeah.
and
Which is
youth. 2 o'clock EDT, but the time is the time that everyone should come. That's the best time that it is. And can
yeah.
you tease us the story that you're thinking about telling? Because people who watch this get a sense of your story, and that's one of the reasons they watch the videos.
Okay. I'll give you a teeny sense of what it's about. Um, Most often, I'm in the folktale, mythical world, but I also tell, personal stories, and those are the ones that I do right. And, well, I thought it would be nice to exercise that part of storytelling that doesn't get quite as much outing, and so quite as much play. And my story is called Where's Marie? And it's this by turns, as I wrote to you, I'm gonna just repeat that because I
No
liked
worries.
it. By turns, terrifying and funny story of me substituting for a career waitress for a couple weeks in the financial district for construction workers in San Francisco.
Well, if that is a reason to tune in, it definitely is. Mindy, it has been a rich pleasure. We've learned about the craft. We've learned about the whole idea that story is expansive both into dance and that we need to center ourselves into the moment of story. And we're so glad to have you on debut. Mindy Donner, I'm giving
Mhm.
you the chance and opportunity for the last word.
Thank you. That's my last word.